Right.
Brian.
Well, I guess I will introduce you to the audience. I'm here with Rondell Trevino, and we have chatted briefly once before, but we're here to get to know each other tonight and talk especially about immigration and issues related to immigration. And Rondell, you are in charge of a group called the Immigration Project.
Yeah.
And tell me, how did you get in? How did you get interested in immigration?
Yeah. So I got interested because it's one personal for me. More importantly, I come from a long list of immigrants in my family. But more importantly, my wife is an immigrant from El Salvador. She was born in Guatemala, lived in El Salvador, and she's been in the States going on 4 years now. But during that process, um, of in being engaged and getting married and waiting 2.5 years for her visa to get approved, God really opened up my heart for this topic and the importance of comprehensive immigration reform, educating the church on immigration from a biblical perspective, seeing the problem with the extreme sides that people can easily fall into, and wanting to help the church and just people of goodwill to think balanced on this issue, and living in that tension of how do we show deep compassion to asylum seekers, immigrants, undocumented immigrants, migrants, refugees, but at the same time, how do we also seek to respect the rule of law and pass immigration reform that is a healthy approach to border security, and helping people to understand that it's not an either or, it's a both and. And so with the Immigration Coalition, everything that we produce with articles, podcasts, episodes, even our social media platforms, we try to be as biblically balanced as possible, that show compassion to immigrants, but also respect the rule of law. And then also just moving here to Austin 3 or 4 months ago, now we're a part of holistically serving migrants at the border and providing them with clean access to drinking water. So, yeah, that's kind of how we jumped into it. And TIC, the Immigration Coalition, has been a nonprofit for going on 2 years this December. So it's definitely deeply personal. And I have the joy of living with my amazing and beautiful wife every day and seeing an immigrant literally defy every stereotype that is perceived of immigrants in the country most of the time. So, yeah.
So, did you meet her in El Salvador or Guatemala, or did you meet her up here?
Yeah, I met her during a Bible program in Memphis, Tennessee in 2011, 2012. And so we were friends during that time, and then we reconnected when she went back to El Salvador after the Bible program, and it was around September 2013 when we reconnected, and then we started dating, and then by God's grace, we got married on February 14th, 2015. And then we waited about 2 years for her visa process to go through, and we were separated for about 2 years, and our process was fast. So the trauma and even emotional trauma and even physical trauma that we went through just being apart as a married couple was definitely sanctifying and tough for us. But that whole journey was God's way of saying, I'm going to give you a heart for immigrants as a family, and this is something I really want y'all to do.
Yeah, we went through that more with our children. 3 of my 5 children married spouses born overseas. And one of them was already a U.S. citizen. She was from Brazil and was already up here when my son met her. Another one was in Brazil, and my daughter was involved in missions in Brazil and met him. And we went through that whole immigration mess. Very difficult, very straining. And then my middle son was teaching English in China and met a girl over there. And we went through the whole thing again, bringing her in. And they are now all U.S. citizens. And we're very happy with that. But it's a very involved process. And
Yes.
we were fortunate because so many people get messed up in the process. And uh, in Brazil, we met a couple that they were having to live in Brazil for 10 years
Mm,
before the wife could apply. She had been brought into this country as a baby and didn't even know that she was undocumented until
mm,
after she had graduated from UC Berkeley. And then she got married and then realized that she was not in the country legally. And in order for her to apply, she had to go back to Brazil, where she had never really lived. And she had to be there for 10 years. So her American born husband was down there with her, and they were finding things to do for 10 years till she could apply to come back to this country.
oh yeah, you speak to the I call it a mixed up complex yarn that is just the process of being able to come to the country, and even the legal way um, is just it's just so complex. And even since 2016, it's hurt a lot of migrants and asylum seekers as they're stuck at the border living in tents. But even when it comes to people who have been here and lived in the country, it's making it even more difficult. And I think you hit on an important topic for a lot of undocumented uh, kids who are brought here. They don't even know they're undocumented until they graduate high school or college, and they say, "Hey, mom, dad, can I do I qualify for FAFSA or something?" And then the parents finally say, "Hey, mijo, let's sit down and let's talk about this." And then they finally let them know. While the entire time they only know the United States as their home, and so
Right.
that's the complexity when it comes to visa processes. And so for us, knowing that I'm an American citizen, we had the easy way out. Our paperwork got moved up to the front. It still took 2 years, and it wasn't our way to say, "Hey, you need to do it the right way." It really just was God's way of gut checking us and saying, "Wow, there is so many more people. There are so many other migrants and asylum seekers and immigrants wanting to come to this country, and they're having to wait years to come." And then you're like, "Oh, so there's a reason why a lot come undocumented, because they can't trust a consistent process to get their applications even reviewed." And even though I'm against coming undocumented, I still show mercy, and I still say, "Well, I understand in some ways, because the system, you can't even trust the system." And so it's just so complex, and it's heart wrenching to understand that and to know that. So yeah.
I spent much of my teaching career teaching junior high and teaching uh, kids of recent immigrant extraction. Some of them had grandparents who had come up here in the 60s or maybe even before that, come to Texas and then come to California. Um, but most of the families still had connections in Michoacan or Jalisco, and
Mm,
uh, and so there was a constant stream of new relatives coming in. And so looking out at any particular class, I could figure that there were probably 4 or 5 students in a typical class that did not have legal paperwork to be here. And, we never asked. Uh,
mm, yeah,
we didn't want to know the
right.
individuals. There were a few that we got to know when they went on from the junior high and graduated from high school, and then DACA became available. Then several
Mm,
of them did apply for DACA, and at that point, we found out who uh, was DACA eligible and needed it. And they were all so many good kids.
right.
And at that point, that I really had to start thinking about how much we needed to reform our whole system. And of course, we had just brought in our sons and daughters-in-law, so we had some other experience with the immigration system.
Mm, yes. And I'll just give you a shout out personally, Brian. I think, someone who, and we'll get into this, but someone who's politically homeless myself, and feeling like there's just not a lot to support on either side, and seeing the need for so many, even fellow Christians and just people I know personally who reach out all the time. Um, just saying, man, I just can't find a home in either party, and how hard it is to say, well, I just, you know, I don't think we're far. Well, I don't think we're reaching too much to say there can be a candidate that is pro-life from the womb to the tomb, and I honestly feel like you personally, along with the American Solidarity Party, have been the most consistent on that. And so I really applaud you for doing that and knowing that it's not popular, sadly, right? I mean, it makes no sense to me why it's not popular. We live in a broken world, right? But I do applaud y'all for attempting to do that as best as possible, and holistically saying, how do we care uh, for people from the womb to the tomb, and there has to be policy and views out there. And I think uh, y'all have been able to draw folks like myself to 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 really read upon what y'all are doing and really see, that there is potential in another way that's a healthy way. So I really appreciate you and your expertise on that, and the American Solidarity Party as a whole.
Well, thank you, Rondell. I'm going to back up to what you said about popular, uh, because I think at the grassroots level, uh, both a pro-life message and a immigration reform message are very popular. Uh,
Hmm.
we're in a situation, you know, I think polls have shown that for going back even into the Obama administration, 80% of the American voters wanted to see a merciful solution for the DACA students. But even though 80% of the people wanted it, uh,
So,
Congress
done.
couldn't figure out how to do it. And it's partly because Republicans don't want to do anything that Democrats might get credit for, and Democrats don't want to do anything that Republicans might get credit for.
Hmm.
And if we just say, let's fix this, we don't care who gets the credit, let's just fix this for people, we could solve that problem. And on the pro-life, uh, you've got an enormous number, something like 20 million, 21 million Democrats who consider themselves pro-life.
Hmm.
And you've got a large number of people in the Democratic Party who think there should be some legislation limiting it. You know, the idea that the Democrats have of, you know, any abortion, anytime, for any reason, and celebrate it. Um, that's a very tiny proportion of registered Democrats.
Hmm.
But every single one of the original group of candidates that they had in the primaries supported the very narrow little position over here. You know, any abortion, any time, for any reason, and that's not a popular position. It's the party
Hmm.
position that they're pushing, but it's not that popular even among the
So
Democrats.
do you think it, because of that? Do you think that oftentimes some of those, many of those who are like, I'm pro-life from the womb to the tomb, do you think because of the, I would even say maybe even some of the fear mongering and pressure from some of the parties, both parties, they almost create this narrative that there's only two choices, right?
Mhm.
And be, because there's only two choices, you have to give in on your convictions and choose one side. Do you feel that way? That there's, I feel like there's pressure.
The,
Um,
the the pressure is from the extremes.
mm,
The extremes in both parties want to bring people from the middle of the road to their side, and so they they do use fear mongering, They use every psychological trick they can think of. And Americans in the middle are feeling that tug of war, and they're saying, wait a minute, there has to be something in the middle that people can agree on.
Mm.
That we can if you allow the two extremes, the tug of war, then we're going to have all of our legislation over here for a while, and then the other side will get in. And we saw it when Trump came in, and his first goal was to eliminate every single thing that had Obama's name on it. And if the Democrats get back in, they are going to pull it over here, and they're going to want to eliminate every single thing that had Trump's name on it. And we will be for the next, who knows, 20, 30 years, as long as we can survive as a country before we're pulled apart, we will be tugged back and forth and back and forth. And the people in the middle will lose.
And do you believe? I believe this. Many of those who are in the middle, and are using this new language, politically homeless, because they're being ignored. They're saying, "I'm staying home. Nobody's focusing on what I believe," and yet that seems like that might be the biggest area that one or more sides would want to focus on. Right? Is to somehow be as balanced as possible with these issues. But again, I think the pressure of those extremes, especially on TV, it's entertaining, right? It's popular to watch, and then people fall into to having these false narratives that there's only two choices. And I think that's, like you said, we have to try to fight and advocate in such a way that recognizes those who are politically homeless, that recognizes those in the middle as much as possible, to say we see you and we value your opinions and your views, and we actually, because I feel like, Brian, a lot of people in the middle were, and I'll speak for many, we're tired of a political party, in the sense because of the fact that they have been so polarizing and so um, uh, so untruthful in many ways. And so it's just like, I'm afraid to be a part of a party, because I'm so wounded by the extreme narratives, that it's like, man, I'm just looking for a movement of people to say we need a different way. Um, and I feel like that's what many of us are feeling right now during this election, and it's hard for me, man. I'm such a black and white person, like, in the sense of, like, I'm all in or I'm all out, like, and that can make me feel, definitely as an outsider in many circles, because I can't. It's hard for me to understand the notion, and say I'm politically homeless and I'm pro-life from the womb to the tomb, but I'm going to lay down my convictions to vote for this side, may it be the Republican or Democratic Party. While when I do that personally, for me, I feel like if I vote for the Republican side, I feel like personally I'm saying unborn babies matter, and they matter more than immigrants at the border. And I'm like, but that's so inconsistent with my faith. And then on the opposite side, it's the same thing, right? And so I'm like, man, there has to be another way where God's creation and people that we believe everyone on this earth are equally created and they have equal value. And there has to be a way forward, and an avenue where we can feel that we can be a part of, because it really represents our ideals and our beliefs.
Absolutely. Um, and I don't know what it's like in Texas. Here in California, we are such a blue state that there are more independents than there are Republicans. And all across the country, membership in both parties is going down. And neither party is doing anything to try and attract new voters, except for pointing fingers at the other side is. For example, and we're recording this today when Biden has just announced Kamala Harris as his
Yeah.
vice presidential candidate.
Yeah.
That was not a unifying choice.
Mm,
He he had a lot of women who he could have chosen from. I think uh, all through the primary period, the polls showed that Elizabeth Warren was everybody's second choice. She didn't have as many people who thought she was their first choice, um, but for every other candidate, if you polled them and said, "Oh, who's your second choice?" They said Elizabeth Warren. So that would have been an obvious choice if Biden wanted to pull the party together. Uh, Pick
mm,
somebody who's popular through all the different factions. Uh, Harris is not popular with Black Lives Matter, partly because of things she did when she was Attorney General of California.
right.
And she's the worst possible candidate from the point of the pro-life movement.
Yep.
When she was Attorney General in California, she's the one that started the prosecution of David Dalladin and Sandra Merritt, which is really a trumped up, phony charges. It's simply persecution,
Mm,
and she started that. That was her initiative on that one, and they're still on trial. The thing is dragged out, and the original charges that the films were documented are doctored in such a way to be misleading. Courts have ruled against that. There was a trial there in Texas that said they looked at this stuff and said, no, nothing has been done to be dishonest with these. And in they've got them on the, invading the privacy, but those were public conversations in public areas. And there's a California law designed to protect undercover journalists that go into um, some of the meatpacking places and expose stuff. So there's all kinds of things that make the prosecution of Dalladin and Merritt really phony. And she started that. She's the one who pushed that.
mm,
Uh, so it's the extreme abortion wing of the party that said they wanted her, and now they've got her. And you have to wonder if the Democrats seriously want to beat Trump this year. Uh, they don't look like they want to beat Trump. They look like they
oh,
want to make sure that the abortion industry is securely in charge of the party, and that seems to be a higher priority for them than
exactly.
winning the election. That's just pulling us farther apart, more extremes. And of course, the Republican Party's not doing any better. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of people. Even today, when the announcement was made, we suddenly got a bunch of new people inquiring about our party. Um,
Wow.
so Biden has gone out of his way to help us.
That's the thing is, um, when I heard that Kamala Harris was the VP and stuff that I've read about the corruption and when she was, before she even ran for president and things of that sort, it was disheartening. And definitely when it comes to being pro-choice and and for abortion, um, and yet I I feel like the narrative is how can we, as a Democratic Party, say we create this narrative that we are the only party, we're the ones that can save America from Trump, and so even people of faith will lay down their biblical convictions, and even I've seen on Twitter even today the celebration of that. And for me, I just can't. And for the politically homeless like myself, it does draw us closer to an American Solidarity Party to say, man, I at least notice what they're doing that's healthy, that's balanced. They're at least seeking to get the attention of those in the middle, um, as as we have been talking about. And so it's just really disheartening to see that. And it, you wonder, and we're not a fly on the wall in any of those conversations, but you wonder, like, why not? Why not go after those who are balanced? And in many ways, it just doesn't make for good TV, right? I
Right.
mean, it doesn't make for what people want to see. People love the entertainment when it comes to those two extremes. But I feel like even with the American Solidarity Party and many of the political homeless like myself who are outspoken unapologetically, there is a slower movement growing that has been encouraging to see. Where folks are starting to notice, I don't have to pick a side. There's a different way, and that's what's been encouraging.
There's a lot of different organizations that understand basically the same problem, and they may have slightly different target audiences. They may have slightly different uh, ways of going about and gaining the solution. But there's a lot of people in the middle that are looking for solutions, and some of them are uh, looking for election reform.
Yeah.
There's those that are pushing for ranked choice voting, and there's those that are pushing for various other reforms in how we vote and how we comprise Congress. Um, and there's groups like No Labels. There's groups like the AND campaign, which is doing a really great job organizing, primarily coming out of the Black churches, but uh, they're
Yeah.
reaching out and they're accomplishing stuff. And and so there's a lot of different organizations that are all kind of pushing in the same direction.
Well, Brian, one of the things that I'll stop you really quick. One of the things that has been important, especially being in Texas and knowing that the primary ethnic group by 2040 will be Latino,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that we as Latinos are more conservative than people think. We're big on family. We're definitely more conservative in some ways. Um, that is an untapped group, and I've yet to see organizations that are. I know you and I've had a really good conversation about how do we do that, what does that look like, and I was really thankful that you brought up that important fact and noticed that, because right now is the time for the conversation around how do you attract and get into the proximity of what Latinos believe, because it's a quiet growing group that will be the primary minority ethnic group years to come.
Well,
And I think sometimes our people can be put under the rug unintentionally or even intentionally in some ways because of the black-white binary. And I think as a Mexican American, it's important for us to start noticing that group and saying we have to go into those areas and talk to them and hear them out, because that's an important voter base, but more importantly, they're an important people.
yeah, my career has been mostly um, with actually my wife and I met at a UCLA class. The name of the class was Education of the Mexican American Child,
mm,
and that was in 1971 or 72. And both of us throughout most of our career have taught classes that were made up mostly of Mexican American families. Uh, I've worked with very few blacks. Uh, our classes more recently have had more Salvadorans. While I was at UCLA, uh, I tutored English in Chinatown and had lots and lots of friends in the Asian American immigrant community. And so I've actually had more experience with immigrant families than I have with blacks. My wife attended a mostly black high school, and we have some friends from that era. Um, but uh, it was so obvious 20 years ago that the the Republican Party should have been recruiting uh, from the Hispanic community, because the immigrants tend to be conservative family values people.
Yep.
I remember there was a convention in California, the California Republican Party, 1998 thereabouts, and the governor at that time, Pete Wilson, who had presidential ambitions, uh, pushed through a vote that was very, very anti immigrant, anti Mexican. It was kind of an English only kind of approach. They weren't going to allow bilingual education and that kind of stuff. And I remember hearing that news, and it just shook me to my bones, because I thought, why are we alienating a natural constituency? Those people should have been for family values, and
Mm.
that should have been our group. And we lost them. We lost them for at least a generation. And maybe now uh, the Republican Party, and in California there is no Republican Party really. We haven't elected anybody to statewide office in, I don't know, 15 years or so.
Wow.
And so um, we're ready to replace, in California, we're ready to replace the Republican Party with something else, and maybe it'll be a Solidarity Party. Who
Mm.
knows? But yeah, you're right. The 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 immigrant community in general tends to be conservative in their family values outlook, and any party that pushes them away, or the Democrats try to pull them in, but can't offer the family values that we offer.
Mm.
So yeah, they should be up for grabs.
Yeah, I agree 100%. 100%. 100%. That's good.
Well, you were recently down to the border. You were passing out water in some of the uh, camps that just across the border, right?
Yeah.
Tell us what the conditions are down there.
Yeah. So, well, one, let me start off with, one of the biggest problems down there was many of the migrants and asylum seekers, 2,000 plus, so around 500 families, were didn't have access to clean drinking water, and so many of them were drinking filtered water from the Rio Grande. And one, researchers don't recommend it because of the fact that it is traumatic emotionally, because of the feces and many of the immigrants who have passed away in the water. It's just traumatic in general for them.
Mhm.
And then also researchers have also said we need to make sure that that the water is as clean as possible. But even when you filter the water, it's just not it's not even good when you filter it because of how
Mhm.
dirty it's been. And so we noticed that there were some organizations, and they do really good work, and they were trying to do their best with filtering the water, but migrants and asylum seekers were essentially refusing to drink the water. And so we stepped in, and instead of going in there and saying, hey, we're the Immigration Coalition, we're running things here, we said, how can you build a relationship with someone down there who has a relationship and been there for years? And so there's a missionary um, who we partnered with who's been there since 2000. And so he has become almost our director of missions there. And so we said, hey, what does it look like to provide clean water, and not provide a well for right now, because our goal is that they don't live there. that they do get processed eventually. And so we ended up partnering with a water company in Matamoros, Mexico, which is where the migrants and asylum seekers are staying. And so we partnered with them, and every Tuesday and Wednesday, they come and they bring 5-gallon water jugs for each family. And the families take the water jug, keep it for a week, and then the next week they switch out the one that's empty and give them a new one. So we've been doing that for 3 or 4 weeks, and it's been a huge blessing and really cool to see just how joyful they are that they finally have access to clean water. And we've had people from around the country partnering with us on what that looks like. We've told folks, folks can sponsor a migrant family for $7 a month that will provide them with clean water for the entire month. And so people all around the country have really partnered with us and have seen it as a tangible way to help people, from Christians to Muslims to atheists to people all around the spectrum. Have said, human beings deserve water, and so they partnered with us. And so they definitely didn't have clean water, so we're able to be a part of that that solution, and our initiative is called Water for Immigrants. And so that's been good. But also at the same time, they live in tents, and it's scorching heat at the southern border. And so it's just been to see pregnant mothers and to see kids and babies and fathers living in these tents every day is just deeply saddening, and just breaks your heart to see that. And most have come, and you hear the notion that they're here illegally, but they're not even in the United States. They're in Mexico, and they're simply doing it the legal way. They're staying there, and they're trying to get their asylum process even just reviewed, and trying to seek asylum. And amazingly, they're not trying to come undocumented. They're trying to stay and do it the right way. And so that's been really amazing, and to see how joyful many of them are. And when you go, it's just like when you go to another country and you do service work, and you learn more about your brokenness and how privileged you are, and then how joyful those people are. And I think, as a person of faith, I think the Lord has brought the nations to our borders, and you don't have to go on a plane to serve. You can just go to the border. And so it's been a blessing to see, but also really hard, because they're essentially homeless, and they're waiting for their asylum. And even before President Trump enacted that 60-day halting process, even before that, they were living there. So it wasn't, they didn't have enough employers. They weren't that, they had a migrant who had a piece of paper and a pencil writing down people. Like, it was just a broken process for them, their asylum cases to get even looked at. So, with President Trump halting that process there, which is just ridiculous, it's sad, but it feels like they're going to be there for a while. And so it's been really sad to see that, and to see the numbers grow there, and to see people created in God's image being treated that way. And you know what, Brian, many of them are even people of faith. Like, they have little churches, and it's just like, man, they just deserve to be in the country. I mean, could it be that God is bringing these people to our borders to help our country thrive and to grow spiritually, rather than coming to take our jobs? I believe that they're actually, God is ordaining them to be a part of our communities, to show those conservative family values, to show that faith, to show that they trust the Lord, and even maybe evangelize to some of us who may believe we're following the Lord when we're following possibly a political party rather than the Lord. So it's been eye-opening and really just convicting, but also a blessing to serve down there. And we're thankful just to be a part of that.
You're involved in one camp. How many camps are there altogether?
There's one primarily in Matamoros, Mexico, with the 2,000 plus migrants. And I believe a month or so ago, migrants, there was like the first case of COVID there. In that area, the entire Rio Grande Valley, it's the COVID-19 cases are heightening, and so many of the migrants, they can't practice social distancing, and they can't. We have provided around 10,000 masks, so they're actually using the masks that we've provided, But social distancing and staying as clean as possible is it's not as available as if it is for you and I, right? They're living in tight tents with folks, and they're just, one of our relationships there said, we don't even know how many folks have COVID. I mean, it's just, it's just crazy there in some ways when it comes to the cases and what's going on with COVID. And so another piece with the water is not only does it give them and help them to stay hydrated, but it also has allowed them to stay as clean as possible too. Instead of having to wash their hands in the Rio Grande, they're able to use this clean water. So we're trying to do as best as we can to serve them. And one of the cool things is we've seen people, like I said, from different religions, from different backgrounds, from different political affiliations partner with us on this. And it's been really cool to see that this is possibly, hopefully when COVID suppresses, this might be a first step for people to take away their political lens when they see immigrants and see them as humans.
I'm trying to remember. It's right up against the Rio Grande, you're saying.
Oh yeah, and right across the border of Brownsville, Texas.
Okay.
Right when you go past the border into Mexico, you're in Matamoros, and right there is the camp.
Okay. It's Tamaulipas.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah,
When this whole thing, the COVID thing started, the first event that I actually had to cancel out of was a 3 or 4 day trip down to San Diego, and it was with a fellow who works with a lot of immigrant ministries, and he was going to kind of walk us through some of the camps. The La Mesa Processing Center, which is on the U.S. side, and I don't remember the name of the camp in Mexico, but I was really looking forward to that. But that was going to be for like March 20th or something like that.
right.
So that had to be the first thing that we canceled out of, and I was very disappointed at that. How many different nationalities are represented among the asylum seekers?
Yeah, so I would say around 12 to 13. I mean, you have people from Venezuela, Ecuador, Nicaragua, Mexico, um, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras. There are some Asians and Africans as well. It's become a refugee camp in many ways.
Right.
And so it's a multi-ethnic group of people. I know most of the time people think that, immigrants and refugees are primarily, they're primarily Latinos, and they are, but it's also not a monolith. It's a multi-ethnic group of people um, who are at the border. And so that's where I get into like, man, I really think that, there's an opportunity for the church, because we're called to care for the marginalized and just people in general, to save, possibly some of the trips that have maybe been canceled because of COVID, and say, how can we partner with the Immigration Coalition to serve at the border, and just to love migrants and asylum seekers.
Are you familiar with some of the history down there when General Pershing, President Wilson sent General Pershing into Mexico? Because it's very similar to what we're in. I don't remember the exact year, maybe 1909 or something like that. Pancho Villa attacked a little town in New Mexico that was like a mile across the border. And as a result, Wilson sent General Pershing into Mexico. And he was, I don't remember exactly how long he was down there, but while he was down there, he started collecting a whole bunch of Chinese that were showing up, and they wanted to be cooks and laundry and everything like that, because the United States had outlawed immigration from China in 1883, I think. And the Chinese had come to Mexico to get as close to the United States as they could. And they had been living there for a number of years. And so when Pershing went down there, he had a couple thousand of them, the Chinese, join his expeditionary force as
Hmm.
workers. And when he came back to the United States, he brought that whole group into the United States, and then he went to Washington, D.C. to get special permission for them to stay in the United States. So, we've had this kind of thing on the border going on over 100 years.
Mm, wow. That's amazing. Yeah, that's some good history right there. And Brian, this has been going on, before Trump, right? I mean, the guy who we partner with, who does missionary work at the border, he's been there since 2000, so it's not a surprise. For many of us, it might be since 2016, but this has been going on for years.
Mm-hmm.
So Brian, answer this, because I know many people, when we post this, who are politically homeless, will watch. I posted on Twitter earlier, and many people love when you and I jump on a call together. They say they want to be a fly on the wall. What is the American Solidarity Party? What can they offer for those who are politically homeless, and draw many of us to that party, if you will, and allow us to feel like we can be a part of that movement? What would you say to
Oh,
those?
first and foremost, we are pro-life for the whole life. We're consistent life. We don't want to just settle for getting babies born. We want to see a society that encourages uh, women to not just complete their pregnancies and deliver a baby, but then give women the kinds of help that will allow them to be successful as
Mm,
parents. And I think so often the causes for abortion, the main cause is fear.
mm,
A woman looks at a 20-year commitment to something that is so enormous, and the costs of medical, the costs of college, the costs of nutrition are so scary
mm,
that I think that's the reason for most abortions. And if we can work to reduce the fear factors and help women understand, and fathers need to be a part of this, but to help parents understand that parenting is doable. They can do it, and they can be successful at it,
mm.
and it can be a rewarding experience. Then we can cut off the reason for abortion.
Right.
So that's our first emphasis. Um, but we also want to see uh, justice in all of its forms, racial justice, environmental justice. Uh, One of the fears that a woman is going to have is that she's going to have children that wind up in the school to prison pipeline. And we can stop that pipeline up. Uh, we need to do a better job, uh, especially in lower income areas, of providing good schools. Um, and all of this is going to require reorganizing um, how we pay for schools. It's going to require um, dealing with some entrenched powers, uh, from both the computer industry to um, unions. Now, I happen to be a member of or was until I retired, California Teachers Union. And I didn't see in my local union the kinds of things that I have heard about in some of the other cities where the teachers um, have not got as good a reputation. What I saw in my local union, and that's the only thing I can refer to, is I saw teachers who wanted to teach kids, and
Mm,
they wanted to create a system that was conducive to teachers teaching kids. That was the top priority, um, and that should be and should be encouraged. And so we want to see um, justice across the board.
mm,
Uh, Environmental justice means we need to get rid of the pollution. So many of our poorer neighborhoods are in areas with horrible industrial pollution, water. Well, you mentioned the Rio Grande. You
oh
know,
man, I can go on a whole conversation with that with the colonias areas. I mean, we can have a whole conversation about that down the road.
yeah, we
Yes,
need to clean up our water.
my
We need
God,
to clean up our air.
yes.
I ran for Congress 2 years ago in the district that included part of Fresno, California. There were two zip codes that were 12 miles apart. And in one of those zip codes, the life expectancy was about 68 years. And 12 miles up the road, the life expectancy was like 81 or 82 years,
Hmm,
12 miles away.
hmm,
And you can guess which of those zip codes had the dirtier air, which zip code has the worst schools. You know,
hmm,
you can go down everything that makes a community healthy. Uh, the zip code, and it included Fresno Chinatown and some areas that were a lot of immigrants, and uh, there was a fair amount of homelessness there, and so there were lots of different reasons for it. Uh, but a lot of it went back to the old redlining that put all of your uh, people of color into certain zip codes. And obviously, the social services all went into the other zip codes. And so those things are still around, and we have to do what we can to alleviate the differences. Um, and then the fourth area that we focus on is peace. And peace is both with our neighboring countries and within our country as well. So those are things that the American Solidarity Party wants to focus on.
hmm. That's good. What are y'all's what are y'all's views when it comes to immigration?
Well, the very first thing, like yesterday or the day before yesterday, we have to fix the DACA problem, and
Yes.
that should be doable. 80% of the voters want to see a merciful solution, and so it's not the voters that are the problem there. Uh, the the problem is in Congress itself,
Yes.
and so that we should be able to do that immediately. That should have been done 10, 15 years ago. Um, then you get into much more difficult problems, and there's always going to be trade-offs. You've got a lot of different vested interests. You've got both the high-end immigrants, the tech industry bringing in a lot of technicians, computer techs from India and from China, um, and that is, um, those are brilliant people that are helping the country, but they're also putting our own technicians out of work. You hear stories of people who've been working in those industries who are being asked to train their replacements, and the replacements are immigrants that are being paid half the salary that they were being paid. And yet those are the big companies that are such heavy donors. So that's not going to be easy.
Mm,
Um, but we need to do something that allows protection of the workers who are there. We still want to allow in some people bringing skills from other countries, uh, but that's that's not the highest priority. But it tends to be the one that gets a lot of attention.
yes.
I live in an agricultural region,
Mm,
and the needs of the agricultural workers are very different than the computer technicians. And here we need, well, first of all, we need to give those people uh, a legal status so that they're not constantly in fear of being arrested and deported. Um, there needs to be a supply of people coming in who are willing to do backbreaking work in the hot sun and cold winters. But part of that has to be um, an acknowledgement that those workers are willing to come to that kind of lifestyle because they don't want their kids to have to face that. When we're going to use somebody's labor like that, we need to recognize that part of the bargain is we need to give their children the opportunity to join our society. Um, that's just being fair.
yeah. Uh,
All of that's going to require some really difficult negotiation.
right. I think for us at the Immigration Coalition, it's striking that balance of showing deep compassion to immigrants, migrants, and asylum seekers, and at the same time seeking a multifaceted approach to border security. And I think both sides sometimes can, even when you've seen that one side wants to give in, the other side still doesn't, and so you're like, do you really want? Is there really compromise there? And it sometimes just like it doesn't feel that way. And I think for us, we believe that it would be DACA would be the first piece to automatically. I mean, even the American people are saying it right off the bat from both sides, all
Mm-hmm.
sides. We need to allow and give a pathway to citizenship for DACA recipients as soon as possible. And then also allowing undocumented immigrants to come out of the shadows and to earn legalized status or citizenship, and those who and allow them at the same time when they earn legalization or citizenship to also get right with the law by paying a certain fine of some sort for a few years or some sort. Um, and then at the same time, while you're allowing those who qualify to do that, I believe when they come out of the shadows, you're also able to focus on the percentage of those who are possibly drug traffickers or human traffickers or gang members who are not allowing our country to flourish. And then at the same time, also for us at the Immigration Coalition, we're more conservative on the sense of uh, having a multifaceted approach to border security that not only enhances technology along the entire border and at ports of entry, but also augmenting and establishing some barrier or wall in specific places, not along the entire southern border, and not a way to do it that keeps out migrants and asylum seekers, but allows us to focus on those immigrants that might be human trafficking or drug trafficking. And then when we're able to focus on that as well, we're able to see those migrants and asylum seekers like at the border right now who do it the right way and are seeking asylum, and able to focus on them more by by hiring more judges and hiring more employers to process their paperwork quickly and more efficiently. That way they trust it, they trust the process. And also for me, Brian, we've also thought about what would it look like to also keep countries, and I don't know what this looks like logistically, but also keep those countries in Latin America and different specifically Latin America, keep those governments accountable to the foreign aid money that we give them, which is hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and ask them to help rebuild their country in some infrastructure in some way that allows some to say, hey, I actually have an opportunity in this country. And at the same time, what would it look like to build processing centers in their capitals where migrants or mothers who don't want to go through this strenuous process of then this long journey to the border that can potentially, they can potentially be human trafficked or killed or even adopted into a gang. They can trust a center of some sort in the state and in their country that allows them to hear back from their, when they seek asylum, they hear back from their processing area within 3 or 4 weeks or a month, and
Yeah.
that's a process. So we've actually thought about that in some ways. I don't know what that looks like logistically. We've definitely had conversations with legislators about what that would look like, and they definitely agreed or appreciated the approach there. But I think we can have that holistic, balanced approach to this issue, and I think it would be great. And I think for us, it just makes sense. It's simple, right? It's not a I know it's more complex when you get into the details, but from a 50,000 foot level, it's like it's not that simple. It's not that difficult. Both sides can give one another, and compromise. But I think a lot of times what we see is migrants and asylum seekers and immigrants and even unborn babies, they're viewed as political chess pieces, not people who deserve to be protected and cared for and established some in a balanced way when it comes to even border security and compassion. So we try to establish those views as much as we can. And earlier when you said, there's more people and it's more popular that folks are balanced, people do and are, wanting not to choose both sides. I think that's true because at the immigration court, we get a ton of people who are like so refreshed from the message that we're able to portray, that they're like, man, there's finally a different way. And,
Hmm.
and they don't feel embarrassed to come out and say, well, I don't choose a side. I can choose a better way forward.
Yeah, and obviously, one of the reasons that we haven't made more progress is all the different vested interests. If we let people out of the shadows, um, they are harder to exploit. We have businesses that are using people in a very exploitative manner, um, and for them to stay in those exploitative situations, uh, employers use fear on them, uh, and some of the ones that complain about it the loudest, um, are the conservative business community
Mm.
that talks about how they're taking away our jobs and stuff, and yet those people oftentimes own businesses, and lo and behold, the day before payday, uh, the the immigration authorities show up and cart off everybody in the factory, and the factory owner is spared having to pay 2 weeks labor.
And I
That
think
kind of stuff happens often.
And I think, Brian, you speak on an important piece that we're forgetting too is immigration reform should also include looking into and reforming ICE and CBP. And I'm definitely personally against abolishing it altogether because I do believe there's certain departments and certain people who do their job well. But there are many, just like police departments, there are many folks there, not all, who do need to be retrained, suspended, and possibly in many ways fired for seeing this job as almost like a way to have fun and deport and detain all immigrants. And
Mhm.
one thing that's been popular recently is that new show on Netflix called Immigration Nation. And I just watched the first episode because it's so traumatic to watch. It's just really, really sad. And there was a director there, and this was around 2 years ago, that went from saying, hey, we went 3 years ago from deporting and detaining actual criminals who are human traffickers and drug traffickers to now we're detaining anybody who is undocumented, even if they've lived here for 10 or 15 years and pay property tax and are good people. I mean, just blatantly as clear as day. And that's where I think it needs to be reformed. ICE needs to primarily focus on actual criminals who are doing tremendously terrible work that don't allow our fellow Americans and people to flourish. But those immigrants who are undocumented, who have been here for 10 or 15 years, who pay taxes, who are good people, many people are even of faith and love their neighbors well, they deserve to pay a fine and allowed to stay in the country and earn legalization and citizenship. And not only do we win when it comes to them helping us as a even spiritually and physically in the sense of a good neighbor and a friend, but also economically as a country.
Yeah,
And I think though they need to be many of them need to be reformed and looked into when it comes to that.
most of the immigrants who are here, especially if they've been here 10, 15 years, are integrated into our economy.
Mm,
And the idea that we are going to um, suddenly round up, 12 million people and cart them to the border and kick them across, um, it would set off in this country a depression.
mm,
Because you look at, okay, every one of them is either renting someplace to live or buying someplace to live.
right,
And suddenly you've got all of those empty units of housing. The
right.
housing market's going to crash. You'll have certain speculators who are running around like crazy buying stuff up for cheap. But still, you're going to have an awful lot of defaults on loans. You've got people who are buying a washing machine or a refrigerator on time from Sears or Penny's or these other companies that are already on the verge of collapse. You would toss every one of those companies into bankruptcy. What is a company like Penny's or Sears or Lowe's going to do suddenly with 5 million washing machines that are turned up, uh,
Mm, mm,
unpaid for? There's no way that we could, as a economy, survive a blow like that.
mm,
So it's foolish to even talk about doing that kind of thing. What we want to
exactly.
do is figure out how can we bring these people out of the shadows. They're already involved in our economy, uh, and we want to do what we can to integrate them in completely, give them citizenship, and we don't want to have a permanent underclass of resident non-citizens that are being exploited. That's not healthy for our country.
That's good. That's good. Man, this has been a good conversation. I feel like last time when we spoke on the phone, I was like, I think Brandon and I can probably talk for hours.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how long Amar wanted us to go here, but
I think we cover everything from what I'm looking at. It's
well, good.
a good hour and 8 minutes. It was good.
Well, he
Is
should
there
be
anything
able
else
to
you
cut
want to
that
talk
down
about?
to a workable portion.
Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about that he might want to use or
I guess the one thing that we didn't really touch on as part of uh, immigration control are the private prisons.
mm,
Um,
detention?
there are people who are making big money off of other people's misery. And to me, that's never moral. If there are people who need to be confined, uh, they should not be confined in wire cages. There should be facilities of some kind of minimum standard that we can confine people to. But a private prison makes money on keeping people in prison, keeping the beds filled, keeping, scrimp on things like food and health care and the things that are basic human needs, uh, and turn a profit on them. That would be the one thing that maybe we didn't talk about.
Yeah, and also, you speak on an important piece of family separation at the border and also detention centers. And right now, families are still being separated at the border. Many families and children are not with their parents, so there's a lot of trauma that goes into that. And if there's a when it comes to immigration reform, that would need to be reformed in the sense of when they come and they seek asylum. And asylum, just for those who will be listening, it's legal and it's U.S. law.
Mm-hmm.
When they do that, they're not breaking the law, and so we don't need to separate them. We need to allow them to stay with their children, and allow them to process their claims. And I believe that's one of the biggest reasons why we have 2,000 plus migrants and asylum seekers, 500 plus families living and being willing to live in tents because they don't want to be separated from their
Oh
kids.
yeah.
So
I've got 5 kids. I could not imagine
oh
being
man,
separated from my kids at any point. You do anything to keep that from happening. And
exactly.
the fact that we separated families and then didn't even keep the basic paperwork to reunite those families. Um, how hard is it to simply eh, fingerprint people at the beginning so that you've got ways to identify them, even small children? Um, and you hear the stories of the children being confined in, you've got a 7-year-old taking care of a 2-year-old. Um, that's just that's horrible. There is no way that our country should be involved in that kind of crime.
And there's also, Brian, there's also, migrant children who are having to represent themselves in court in many cases. I mean, it's just blows your mind. And one of the biggest things that we've seen with the broken immigration system with DACA and kids who come unaccompanied and those who are brought here as, children and babies without any choice in the matter, they're being punished for things that they've never chose themselves to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's what is deeply unjust, is to punish a child and have he or she to represent themselves in um in court, or to be in a detention facility as if they're animals and caged up when they're kids and they're created in the image of God. And so immigration reform comprehensively we would have to tackle that, and we'd have to really find ways to treat them humanely and not punish people for acts that they've never committed, especially DACA recipients who were brought here as young children, babies without any choice in the matter. It, like you said, that's the most clear cut issue that everyone is saying. It makes no sense to blame people for acts they never committed.
Right.
And so I
Right.
think that's the first step, like you said, for us to take more steps toward comprehensive immigration reform. I think sometimes these issues are played with, and like I said, they're put over people's head in the political world, for their constituents to actually believe that they're going to actually do something. But the question is, what if they really do have immigration reform? What if there really is a way to protect unborn babies clearly in a concise way, and also the mothers who contemplate that? Then what do they have to hang over those who are longing for policy to be passed, right? It's almost like they're using these problems to continue to hang over people's heads so that they can continue to vote that one side, as opposed to really wanting to say, it's not about the party. Like you were saying, it's not about you choosing me. It's not about one side or the other. Man, we just need to come together and take care of people in America. And who cares who gets credit?
You've opened up a whole new can of worms because both parties do that.
Yeah.
Like you get, I don't know about you, but I get 20 or 30 emails every day from I'm on both parties' lists, and they always say that I'm one of their most valued members and active members. And of course, I haven't been a member of either one of them for many years. But they have issues that they know will pull in dollars of donations. And I first began to worry about the Republican Party, 15, almost 20 years ago, when they kept saying they were pro-life. But I got the feeling that if we ever actually got like a personhood amendment, and we legalized, or we changed Roe v. Wade so that abortion was not legal on demand, that the Republican Party was worried that pro-life people would stop sending them money. And so they couldn't really afford to solve the problem we wanted them to solve. And the Democrats do the same thing for other issues. They're there to perpetuate themselves and not to solve the problems.
Yes, that's exactly true. Well, brother, I had a great conversation with you. I look forward to continuing to continue to have these conversations and to think about these issues, and I do appreciate your heart and what you stand for, and the more conversations I have with you, the more I'm encouraged by what you believe, what you're about. And I think many of those who find themselves politically homeless can really resonate with a lot of the views that you have, and believe in what the American Solidarity Party is trying to do and in moving forward. And so that's encouraging. So I really appreciate you and appreciate your heart for these issues.
Thank you, Rondell, and I appreciate the work you're doing. I encourage you to hang in there and keep trucking that water into the camps and keep sharing Christ's love there. And we will talk to you another time.
Yeah, let me get a picture of us smiling for the social media. All right, smile.
Just a second. Here, let me sit up straight, and then you'll have to do the same for me.
I got you. Yes. All right. Let's see. That way, it's good for people to see that we're on a good conversation together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Perfect.
All right, and now I will get one. Ready?
Yeah.
All righty.
All right, Brian, I appreciate you, brother, man. You have my number. Let's keep talking.
Will do.
I really appreciate all that you do, and yeah, we'll talk soon again.
All right, Rondell. Have a nice evening.
Safe. Okay, have a good one. Bye.
Bye-bye.